Hello, everybody. My name is Serge Pilko, and today I will lead this webinar. By the way, how can you hear me? The webinar is called, okay, great. The webinar is called Migration Legacy Delphi Project to Up-to-Date Delphi Versions. And we will talk about does it have a sense to migrate to Delphi up-to-date versions, or it maybe we have to change another technology. And anyway, let's move on. In the beginning, I like to say a couple of words about me, about our company. We are specializing in application re-engineering, applications enhancement, and of course, migration. It's of course a lot of different migration, something like domains, and we will talk later today about these migration types. Let's say types. Anyway, we are specializing in Delphi development. Even I think that I can call myself like Delphi evangelist. This is why I'm leading this webinar. And also, in the end of the webinar, I suggest if you will have any questions, you can ask them. Not like during the webinar, because maybe I will we will interrupt it and I will explain something what not interesting for the other guys. Also, I'd like say something about the webinars focus group. It was prepared more for the not too deep technical persons, not for the developers. Here is I want explain exact migration tricks or migration steps, like which class to have to change, which one was obsolete, and so on. Here today I will explain and discuss what's the best way for migration of a legacy Delphi project, and how to make a decision, which risks do we have, and so on. Okay, I suggest go next and discuss today's plan. It's like agenda. In the beginning, I will just will say a couple of words about what's the Delphi right now and in the past, why we should still use Delphi. Also, we will discuss and a little bit think about is it what's the best way migration to new up-to-date Delphi versions like Turkey or Rio, or maybe it doesn't have a sense, so we have to go to migration to another technology. Also, I hope I won't be too boring, because my colleagues asked me tell jokes. I will try, but anyway. Also, next we will discuss something like discuss a roadmap how to migrate from Delphi 5 and 7 versions to the up-to-date versions. I will provide some real use cases. Of course, we will discuss a couple of new features and capabilities of new Delphi versions, because we have to provide an evidence for the people, for decision makers, that right now Delphi is actual technology and we still have to use it. And at the end, I prepared some questionnaires that will help somebody make a final decision what to do. For example, migrate to Delphi to new version, or maybe select some intermediate solution, or maybe even select something different totally. Let's move on. What is Delphi? Delphi today and in the beginning, it's like independent tool. When I'm talking about independent, it means that it does not belong to any operation system producer. It's not like native technology for example, like Visual Studio for Microsoft or Xcode for Apple or Android Studio for Google. They were very popular in 2000s, and it was really revolutionary technology because as I remember those times, it was like Visual Studio 6 when you even couldn't create a visual interface. You could, but it was so complicated, and it's not there for the wide wide list of guys or even junior developers. And it was a real rapid application development tool when you could just create a form, put the component, and gotcha, magic happened. Of course, I think it was a gold time. This is 90s and 20s, but after 2003, when Microsoft introduced this as a new technology like .NET and Visual Studio, this Visual Studio became the main competitor for the Delphi, especially for desktop development for the Windows. And of course, Microsoft has a lot of resources, a lot of money for marketing, and right now we have what we have. And a very interesting, I think, thing that the person who has developed, who was like a lead architect and developed, I guess, Delphi and Object Pascal, was persuaded to move to Microsoft in 1996, and after that he worked on C# and Visual Studio. And I remember the stories when I was something like on the conferences with Visual Studio 2003 when somebody just showed this Visual Studio, created project, put the component, press the play button, and magic happened. I thought, oh my God, we had this with Delphi 15 years ago, or no, maybe not 50, but 10 years ago. But anyway, and of course, now I believe in Delphi, and this is a modern cross-platform development tool. Right now, it's not only for Windows, like Windows 32 or 64. It's also for we have a possibility to develop applications for Android, iOS, and macOS, and I think we have a good future. Let's move on next. Why we still use Delphi today? I think that it's still a rapid development tool for desktop, and especially if we're talking about the rich UI, because our team and I also have an experience in development for the rich UI with Microsoft tools like Visual Studio, and I can compare, for example, with WPF. But WPF, it's one of the most popular frameworks for UI from the Microsoft, and it's not easy. No, it's not easy, and it's not easy to start to use this technology. By the way, yes, right now I'm talking about right now we talk about pros and cons of Delphi. It's like right now we're talking about pros, and it's a great interface with WPF. It developer needs a lot of experience. But if, for example, compare with WinForms, of course, using WinForms is much more easy. It's something maybe the same like Delphi, but the interface anyway looks ugly, and if you want to create or override some user interface, user experience, it takes a lot of time and knowledge. It's not easy to use WinForms for rich UI, because right now for Delphi we have FMX framework with all these styles, ideology, and anyway, I can say that we can create whatever we want, and it's much more easy. Again, it's just our experience. Easy to deploy. It's also like we're hearing from our clients, our partners, that with Delphi we just still create application, compile it, and you will have executable file. If we are comparing it with Visual Studio, you will need a .NET framework. You have to think about versioning. You have to think about compatibility of different assemblies on the same computer for different software products, and so on. The third item is, again, Delphi still have a huge set of third-party components. If we will talk about, for example, TMS, if you will go to their websites, you will see all these sets of components. It's like you can cover. I guess you can cover at least 80% of all your third-party integrations with any SDKs, social media, and other third-party systems. Again, very good that Embarcadero provides regular releases for Delphi. It's not like they developed something 2 years ago and that's all. Of course, each year, such companies like Apple and Android provides new SDKs, new OS versions, and Embarcadero providing updates for the Delphi with updated support of the newest mobile technologies. Of course, it's not ideal. Sometimes it's not, Delphi is not covering 100% of all these SDKs, and yes, but you have a possibility to create a bridge for any of additional SDKs. But it's a technical thing, and we are not talking right now about such things. The next one, I think, is the pros that right now you can take legacy Delphi project and during migration create from this project up-to-date project with new technologies, and you can save the budget, because anyway you can still use the existed business logic source code, and if you want up-to-date and good-looking design, all that you need just for example go to the new UI, and going to this new UI, it can be just, for example, going from VCL framework to FMX. You even can just migrate not all the forms, and you can save this existed source code. But of course, there's pros, and the process can be without the cons. And I think all Delphi geeks know about them, and they think about them, and everybody, I think, worrying about this questions, because the first one is like future risks. Even for me, it's like will Embarcadero have enough resources to compete with part of the development tools? Because if, of course, how can we compare Embarcadero? It's a giant like Google, Apple, or Microsoft. Because Embarcadero should all the time should have to fight and provide some benefits. Why Delphi is better than Visual Studio? Why people still have to use this technology? Because of course Visual Studio also is improving all the time, and I guess they invest a ton of money to this technology, into this IDE, and this is a risk even for me. The second one is like correlated risk is will we have enough specialists and developers in the market? Yeah, unfortunately, we have this gap with developers and specialists in Object Pascal and Delphi after the 2000s, when, for example, even I studied Delphi in my university, and it was those times it was like one of the major tools and for development, and all the universities, technical universities, were based with Delphi courses. And after 2000, it was a gap, and people and all these PhDs started to teach students on Visual Studio with their OP principles, C#, because it became a modern technology. Even now, even today, unfortunately, I don't hear that somebody is studying Delphi in the university. But as you know, last year, Embarcadero introduced this community version, and it's free for the universities, schools, and this is why I think maybe it will somehow change the situation to the better, because we need a Delphi specialist. Unfortunately, even for our team, sometimes we cannot find young people after the university who is wanted, who is ready, because again, they don't want to work on this technology because the next risk, like I feel this like negative information noise, because when some student is telling to his, for example, colleagues that I will work on Delphi, they, oh my God, this is like century or something like. Is it still alive? I don't believe it's like for old school guys which are using file manager for copying the files. But and this is why even we are trying to fight, and something like broke this thinking, and this is the risk. And of course, for example, if somebody came to this technology, to this word Delphi, he can see that the community is not so huge like for Stack Overflow, because we even can go and briefly check statistic, how many questions we have for .NET technologies and for Delphi, and of course it's the numbers are huge. It's like 15 times difference. The one more risk is of course this is the situation that Delphi this is an independent developer, and it will be like a half a step back, because if somebody like Microsoft is already have this technology, Delphi should create a support for this technology. Of course, they have something like versions which like not releases, when Delphi can create a support for new technology, and only after release theoretically Delphi and Visual Studio will have the same capabilities, but unfortunately it's not possible. When Apple is changing the SDK, they can add something new, and unfortunately Embarcadero have a limited time to add this support, and sometimes unfortunately again it's they don't have enough resources and time, I guess. I don't know. The one more risk that again, it's my opinion, that Delphi is not suitable for web development, because again, if we compare, for example, development with .NET or PHP or modern JavaScript frameworks, it seems like Delphi is like compromise. It's a solution with compromise for web. And of course, and then the next one is like, okay, Delphi has a cross-platform mobile development, and yes, of course, we can create a beautiful web mobile applications with Delphi, but we have an experience with creating a very complicated Office applications with Delphi, and it's very complicated. It's not like when you're reading and when you want to implement some easy solution, when you open, for example, Android Studio, SDK description is just 5 minutes job. In Delphi it can take couple of days, because you have to create a bridge file, you have to test, you have to import somehow resources to deployment, and unfortunately it's not so easy. There were the cons of the Delphi, and as is. Let's go next. Now I will just briefly explain what does this mean migration in our situation. It's like, of course, it's a lot of different it's a very wide term of migration. It can be migration from deployment to another platform, from one technology to another technology, data migration, and a lot of the different companies have a different understanding of this. It's just but I have to explain what we are putting to this term. It's not like migration, for example, for website from one technology to another. We also put to this term, this is migration from legacy Delphi project to the up-to-date Delphi, or for example, migration project from Delphi to Visual Studio and .NET. Of course, this is correlated with re-engineering, because if you perform migration from Delphi to Visual Studio, it can be developing from the scratch, maybe. Let's move on. Now, just I gave a couple of ideas. How can you understand that you need a migration? And this is okay, this is like a compilation or request from our previous clients, our feelings. One of the most often requests is like, sorry, but my applications looks very ugly. I'm not talking about MS-DOS, of course, but applications which were built 15 years ago, and this is a huge productive systems. A lot of people and companies still using them, but they looks very ugly. Of course, everybody is watching TV, app stores, and when they look on all these beautiful applications and websites with this design, they want something the same. The second one is again, it's like we have some clients which tell, sorry, but our developers don't want to move with Delphi. They just were retired, and what we have to do? We have a product with Delphi 7, but we cannot find who can support this technology. This is why we can suggest to go to the latest one. Of course, if you cannot easily enhance your applications. You cannot run your application on 64 platform. You have to migrate, because even now, as I know from the next version, even Apple will get rid of the 64 version or 62 version of application, and I think in the future Microsoft will do something the same. Of course, you need immigration. If you need a 24/7 access for your software from any place of the world, and yes, you can do that. For example, with RDP, but in real life, people want to have web technologies and don't have a headache about managing their own servers or virtual machines. Also, maybe you need immigration if your development tool or development environment lost official support, because you know that right now Delphi 7 and even everything up to Delphi Seattle not supported, but Embarcadero. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is what I know, that they have patches and updates of frameworks, SDKs only for the latest versions. And of course, you need migration if you want a mobile application. And I can of course continue with this list, but I think it's enough. And if you need a migration, of course, there is a lot of risk of all this migration, and these risks correlated with the cons of Delphi technology. But for example, the first one is communication risk. If somebody have a legacy Delphi project which it works somehow, it has a huge, maybe sometimes spaghetti code or beautiful code, and you want to migrate to something new, there is a lot of problems that people cannot explain the business logic. Even they can explain business logic, but they cannot explain architecture or the application. And this migration is a risk, because you can, for example, create new specification and architecture and design it to develop from the scratch, but another thing, re-engineering, trying to understand how it works, the current software. Because it can be a lot of different tricks, and everybody forgot about them. And when you're trying to migrate to a new version, it can start stop and work in such places, and you never knew what's going on. The next risk is like current legacy application source code is ugly, it's spaghetti code, not like, it does not have any OP, because again, like I told, it will develop in 2000, and it were a lot of people who became developers, and maybe it's historically, but for example, I saw a lot of not good code which can have to be migrated, and if you will migrate, you will have the decision what to do, to use the same code or perform a code review and rewrite it, but it can also, it took a lot of resources. And of course, this is the next risk, that instead of saving money or budget, you can spend the same amount and maybe even more if compare, for example, with developing from the scratch. And of course, psychological risk, and that you still will use the obsolete technology, and this mental risk. I think it's also is worrying me and other people. But when you made a decision that finally you ready go from Delphi to up-to-date Delphi, not to another technology, because here on this webinar we are talking about going to the Delphi, not to another technology. When you understand the risks, and when you understand the risk, to the next steps, I will explain how we can do that, what's our plan, how to migrate, and also in the end of the webinar, on the latest page of my presentation, I created some questionnaire with like a graph where, again, according to our experience and our suggestions, we provided how to make this decision. Here is just 10 steps of the migration according to our experience. This is like we did. It's exactly some of the projects we migrated according to these steps. And this is where migration from Delphi 7 to Delphi Tokyo version 10.2. The first one, of course, you have to prepare migration roadmap. roadmap is something like this plan. The next step is analyze current application and analyze current source code. Is it really will be cost effective, or maybe your current application have a 90% of that code, which not necessary, just can drop it and just develop from the scratch 10%, this 10%, and you will have a new application on new technology. The next question which we have to ask, is it possible to reuse the existed source code? Is the 60-80%? Is it possible to keep it and use in the new version? Usually we have a lot of systems which work with hardware. We have implemented interfaces, protocols, and we have to use the same code, because rewriting it will cost a lot of money. If we're talking about any ATM machines, kiosks, and that does not have a sense to develop all this communication from the scratch. But if, for example, application consists of only UI and CRUD operations with databases, it's more easy that it does not have a sense to use Delphi. Also, be ready that UI can be and maybe will be rebuilt 100%, because if you want a beautiful, rich application, you have to write. Maybe you have to take an artist and write the application from the scratch, UI application, and implement it as beautiful as you can. Even you can combine VCL forms and FMX forms, and just leave this VCL forms like history, like just in case, but create the main application with FMX and change everything. Of course, next you have to gather the experienced team who knows how to do that. Thanks God, we have a lot of still have a lot of talented developers, Delphi developers. I'm not talking about our company. I'm talking about the Europe and all over the world. A lot of a huge community in Brazil, in Japan, and so on. Next, like we're creating just drawing as a Photoshop or any other graphical tool, modern UI. Just approve it with the client and customer. We're creating a modern user experience with all these techniques. Then the next step is just developing a prototype of UI, where we creating the prototype, implementing all this UI forms and navigation. Customer and client can take it, play with it, how it works on different resolutions, how these responsive techniques are working, and so on. The next step is like migration of functionality, and we are implementing this new forms like step by step. We can take, for example, for existed VCL application, we are taking the first form, adding it to the application, changing the code and creating the links, and so on. And of course, in the end, like test and deliver in the app, and it works. And in the end, we have success clients who really have good looking modern applications. Oh, I'd like to sell a couple of words about new Delphi features. I think that you guys know about them, but let's that the first one is that we can create a modern UI, and we can suggest modern UI support for the applications. This is because of FMX framework, because the idea of all these lawyers is how to create form with FMX is totally different, like for VCL, for example. And we using FMX, we can create whatever we want. much more easy without creating new components. We even can create everything with standard components, and that's very beautiful, I think. And if you will migrate 100% for resale, you have a chance to create a cross-platform application which will support other platforms. Maybe it will be not like mobile, but maybe it can be Linux and macOS, and you will be able to use your application on these operation systems, not like only with RDP or other virtualization technology. And the one more thing, it's like a new feature. No, I think, of course, all you know that Delphi is trying to support this 64 architecture for macOS, and I hope this year it will be implemented. Of course, everything is not ideal, like we discussed that this independent tool, and Embarcadero should apply a lot of forces to make the product up to date. Here is the schema, which I suggested for you how to make a decision what to do with your legacy software. I have to be fair that Delphi is not ideal for everything. It's and I don't tell that I'm not saying that everybody, if we are Delphi evangelist, we have to use Delphi. It has a cons and pros. I just created this questionnaire, and everybody can, and I hope can understand what to do. Because, for example, if we have an old legacy Delphi application, we have, and if this is just a desktop Windows application, and we still want to have this Delphi Windows application, but maybe with just improved UI, yes, we can go to Delphi migration. But maybe somebody want to use this Delphi application, but he also need a web browser access and access from any place of the world. He doesn't want to have, for example, login to virtual machine and work on virtual machine. Yes, in this case, we have RDP support, like web client, and you just open in the virtual machine, not like RDP web client, but including like such virtualization like Parallels, Shadow. You just can have Delphi application in the browser without the operation system. Yes, it's possible. You even can use this on mobile devices, on the tablets. But for example, if you want to move to web back office and front office, I think it will be the better way. And you want to use some cloud solutions where you just can put your application and don't think about the scaling, about the risks, how it will work, about failover. It's better to go to web solution and select something else and migrate to another technology. Also, if we're talking about mobile applications, for some reason it's good to use Delphi, FMX, and cross platform. If your application not very complicated and does not have a tons of integrations, you can use Delphi, and my word is for this. But if your application is too complicated, my word is for going to the native technologies, or maybe others like Xamarin, because anyway, Xamarin has a better support of all these libraries, native libraries. Oh, sorry, I think my assistants will send for you later after the webinar all this recording, and you will be able to check this my diagram. I think that's enough. Maybe you have some questions for me. You can write them in the chat, and I will see them and I will answer them. Here is my contact. You can find me in the Twitter. If you have any questions, you can answer. I will be glad to answer them. What can I say anyway? That I'm trying to create also some informational noise, but positive noise about the Delphi in my Twitter account. I saw who was subscribed to my webinar, and I saw new names which I knew. Anyway, I think that I knew some insights about this migration, and if you will have even technical questions, I will be glad also answer them, because we have a team who migrated big projects, and we knew these tricks, like with all this. For example, anyway, the object Pascal was changed. A lot of components were just disappeared, and of course, it's not like we just can take legacy code and compile it for the new version, because from the one side, a lot of components is very good, but from another side, when all legacy applications were created with a lot of and huge custom components, which just does not exist right now, it can be a problem. No, anyway, if we don't have any questions, I think that's all. We are done. Bye guys. Thank you for coming.